Well, cool. I guess we can get started. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks to WebVisions for having me here to talk a little bit about what happened on the campaign. Hopefully we'll share some interesting stuff, and I'd like this to, I'll blat at you guys for a bit, and then hopefully we can have a little bit of a dialogue and do a little Q&A. So I'll just kick it right off, if it's cool with everybody. There we go. So a little bit about the campaign overall. It's a billion-dollar effort with basically one conceivable metric. And so, so we had about 18 months to prepare, and it left us in a pretty unique situation. And so 2 years ago, today actually, I joined the campaign, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about what I learned and what we did. So yeah, this is that metric, right? You need 270 electoral votes. And there's no really direct way to understand if you're actually hitting that, right? You know what the goal is, but you don't really know if you're actually getting there until the day of. So everything that you can measure about the goal is indirect. You can measure all the other things you can do. And there's no recipe to get you to this. The recipe is driven by what you believe is the best way to get there. Everything changes. Every election is different in terms of the techniques, the tactics, the technology that's available, the issues, the candidates, everything changes. So one of the big things is that you have to root what you do in what you believe. So for us, we believed in these 5 things. We wanted people to do this. If we could register people to vote, and if we could persuade them that voting for Barack Obama was a good thing to do, then we could convince them to turn out and actually vote on election day, or hopefully vote early. And if they did that, then perhaps they could volunteer, right? They could go to a local neighborhood field office and get involved with the campaign and tell their friends why registering, persuading, and doing turnout was a good thing. And maybe you've received from time to time over the past 18 months, an email or two from the campaign, perhaps asking you to give a few dollars. So that was it. And so the first thing that I took away from this is that really your values drive your strategy and they inform your actions. And that sounds a little trite, but it's true. In our case, the president was a community organizer, right, former community organizer. And we believed in a few things. Number one, we would do this by actually empowering people within the field, so volunteers, to build presence in their own communities, to build strong communities, use technology to augment those communities. And we would do that in all 50 states. So even in states like, not to call anything out, but like Montana or Louisiana or Texas, where we probably weren't going to win, we still would have a presence and we still would support people, and those people could still contribute. And this, just really quickly, this also helped us in a ton of ways. The ways in which it helped us was this. When you're in the mix of things and you're trying to figure out how you do what you do, and you're trying to respond, because the whole thing is one part strategy and one part reactive crisis management, understanding what your values are and how you do stuff and what you believe in speeds that decision-making process, because everybody understands what your culture is about. And so then you can say, oh, okay, of course we're going to do this. Of course the response to Clint Eastwood talking to an empty chair isn't to mock him. The response is to show a photo of the president sitting in the presidential chair and saying, this seat is taken. Right? It still gets a little bit of humor to it, but the point is it's still being inclusive. It's just representing the fact that we're over here, and they're over there, we're not going to go down to that level. Just a random example. Anyway, this was our motto. These are our main slogans. Right? So respect, empower, include, win. That's the basis for everything we did. And it's the basis for how we're supposed to act to each other, to volunteers, how volunteers are supposed to treat each other, how we treated the opposition. Right? This is what we walked into. This was a diagram I made on my first day as we tried to figure out, this is the DNC. Somewhere down here is the actual campaign. These are all these different vendors that kind of communicate with each other. They do things, they do stuff. It's all confusing. Nobody gets it. It's an amalgam of years of technology past nobody's ever touched. We wanted to make it look like this, right? So just greatly simplify everything that there was about it, because at a really fundamental level, API design, right? So design down here is user experience design, right? Because if the APIs don't allow you to combine experiences, combine data, and combine flow through the system in a way that's actually valuable to people, you've just built a mountain of useless. Right? So this is what we were up against. We were there for about 540 days, not that, well, we did count actually. 50 states, 1,000 field offices, about 10,000 neighborhood leaders. I won't let you, I'll read off none of the rest of it, except for to say we did 200 apps, which is to say we launched an app roughly every 3 days, which was insane. So this is a story in one part about how you work within a mix of all these types of things. So on the one side, we had deep strategy for apps that we would roll out and develop over a period of time. And then there were some things where somebody would show up and say, hey, I've got this idea, and by the next day, you launched it, right? Some of that stuff was internal, some of that stuff was external, but it was all geared on either making people within the campaign more efficient and more effective, volunteers, or outreach to voters, so that we were always connecting with people. So it was a lot of pressure. This was Scott Vandenplas, who was our director of DevOps, made this cake right before the election. Everybody was afraid to cut into it except for Eric Schmidt, who just walked up like a boss and was like, I am eating this cake. It didn't even taste good. It's a sad truth. But there was a lot of pressure on us. As the first sort of user experience and product person on a campaign, there was enormous pressure, right? First of all, we were the first technology team, so had never been a precedent for this before. And as somebody who's been part of our craft for a few decades, there's a lot of pressure in terms of if we did it right, then in 2016 or 2014, people would see technology and design as something that was valuable. And if we lost, people would see it as an abysmal mistake that should never be repeated. So I really knew, we all knew going into it, that's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders. So one of the main things you have to do is this, just find your story, right? And your story's got to be engaging to you. Right? You have to actually move from a place of power, right? From a place of conviction. And so I'll share with you a little bit about my story. So this is my family. I'm the bright little chap there. My dad was the captain of the football team, and my mom was the homecoming queen, and they were the only people in the history of the United States not to be douchebags and to have that role. True story. We were from a town called Marinette, which is extremely small. This is like in the extreme northeast corner of Wisconsin. So that's what my backyard looked like in winter. So we had a lot of spare time in my hands growing up. And so I put a lot of it into one of these things, right? Just learning how stuff worked, doing design stuff. And I'm still, I'm old enough to remember Jimmy Carter's Malaise speech, right? Where he basically said, look, overconsumption and reliance on foreign oil, these things aren't making us happy. In fact, they're choking off our happiness, and they're leading us down a path that's really bad. So the country responded by electing a former GE spokesperson and making sure, Carter was a one-term president. But a lot of what he said was right, but just people weren't ready to hear that. So anyway, 2004, I volunteered for Kerry. 2008, I volunteered a little bit for the president, was a donor. At this point, I was running a design business. I'd had a background at Orbitz and early on at Groupon. And so I was doing my own kind of thing at this point, helping do design work. So when the president won, I wasn't in Grant Park. I can't say I was one of that crew. I was actually on a plane heading to, I think, San Jose to go work with a client. And I was okay with that. Like, I thought things are in good shape. We just elected this guy. Things are awesome, right? This is my daughter, Vivian. So she was born 3 months premature. And she stayed in the hospital for quite a few months, 2 months, as a matter of fact. About midway through her stay, we get a call one day at home. And it's the insurance company telling us if we don't have a form faxed to them with a doctor's signature by 5 p.m. on Friday, we are liable for our entire bill, which was about $500,000. So we'd be busted, right? And sure enough, well, it was 4:15 on a Friday. So if my wife hadn't been at the hospital, and if it hadn't happened to have been doctor's rounds, and she didn't basically accost a doctor or have them sign off on this form and fax it in, we would have been broke. And here we are, we're doing everything right? We've got jobs, we've got insurance, we've got all the things you're supposed to have, right? We're total norms, But this still happened. And this is happening in the atmosphere where they're talking about death panels, and they're talking about how horrible Obamacare is. And it was just really a reflective moment for me on how broken this system of healthcare in this country was. And it made me really stop, And she's great. You know, she rocks some sunglasses. But you know, she came home right about the same time that Citizens United was passed. And so suddenly you could get unlimited campaign money from sort of political action committees into the campaign. So things weren't looking good for our man, President Obama. And so, you know, it was time, obviously, then to make pierogies. Right. This is what my family does or did. That's my mom in the green sweatshirt there, my aunt and my grandma and my sister. And every fall, we would get together and the ladies would make pierogies together and they would hang out. And it was awesome, right? And then about 6 months later, my mom passed from a brain aneurysm, you know, and that was rough. And we had her memorial. And at the memorial, afterwards, I jumped into the river. You know, so it's me coming out of the river. It's the lighthouse in my town. I'm like, hey, something's got to change, right? I had a successful business. Things were good. I saw 1/10 of our town show up at my mom's memorial, you know, and it really made me start to wonder, what is life about? What am I doing here? Like, this business is going well, but is this what I'm going to be known for? Like, is this the thing they're going to put on my tombstone? It's a little weird, right? So I went and I talked to a man with elbow patches, which is always the best way to get out of these kind of situations. No, this is Michael Slaby. So one day I thought I was going to give another like design 101 to a local startup, like here's why you should use product design, this is why you should have a design co-founder, here's what design does, blah, blah, blah. Instead it was him, and he was recruiting Harper Reed, myself, Dylan, Richard, Scott Vandenplas, Aaron Salmon, and basically forming the foundation of a new tech team. So I have an amazingly understanding wife, which is really good, because at the time he was pitching us, people were basically saying, this presidency is over. And so for me, it was one of those moments of like, are we going to let another leading light on the Democratic side be Cartered, right? Is he just going to have his one term to say things that are important, put solar panels on the roof, we'll tear all that down, forget about it for 30 years? Or are we actually going to try to move things forward? So I said, that's it, I'm going to sign up. So we did it, and things worked out. And I'll share a little bit with you now about what that was and how it turned out for us. So the first thing I'll share with you is a little bit about organizing itself. What I just told you was called the story of self. So that's my story. It has 3 components. It's got a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. So the challenge for me was, I had some crazy, crappy stuff happen in my life. How do I make sense of that and bring things forward in a positive way? The campaign seemed like a really crazy place to reinvent yourself, but also kind of a good place. And finally, the outcome was good. You know, we won. Woohoo! But this structure is part of a greater structure, and I'd like to tell you about it today so that you can learn a little bit about how to take this back to your own organizations. So this comes from a fellow named Marshall Gans. He originally worked with the United Farm Workers, and he developed this framework. Later, he went to Harvard and works in their Kennedy Public Policy School, and that's where he developed this framework. And so the notion is that, generally speaking in organizer terms, we would actually share story of self back and forth. So if I'm meeting with you one-on-one, we'd go sit down and have some coffee. I would tell you how I came to be where I'm at, and you would tell me how you came to be where you're at. And what we try to find there is some commonality, right? Something that bonds us together, something that we can actually work with, no matter how remote and weird it is, something that we can point to and say, yep, we are the same. So we'll talk a little bit more about the structure. But one of the big things that Gans established and that worked within the campaign is that everybody's work is valuable. You just have to figure out what they're good at. Right? I can't tell you how many field offices I went and visited where there was a little old lady who showed up on Sundays, and she was the comfort captain. Right? So what did that mean? She brought baked goods in, and she made people feel good about the fact that they were sacrificing a Saturday or Sunday to be there. Right? The guy who never completed high school, that's okay. There's some collating to do. There's some work to do. You can help us set up something around the place. You can do whatever, right? There's always a way to find people, whether unskilled or skilled, find the right place to put them and help them find their way in that place and actually do good work together. And that's really what organizing is about. That's what the whole deal is. So we'll talk a little bit about what actually happens in a campaign to give you context. So right from the get-go, what you do is you split out all this stuff. So these are basically all a bunch of precincts, and you split them up according to, size of the precinct and who's there and et cetera. And you start to establish field offices. This is a really sweet looking field office that was in California, in Los Angeles. They aren't all very Hollywood, right? The one in Louisiana that I was in New Orleans, was in the back of a beauty shop. In Montana or Texas, very often people are working out of their car, right? And they're meeting people in a McDonald's parking lot, and that's how they're getting people organized. The point isn't so much where it is, but what it is and what it does. And what it does is it gets people engaged, right? So you start with paper. This was a huge challenge for us in the campaign. This notion of, we were trying to get people to move from paper into online. How do you combine online organizing and offline organizing to be one thing? And it was a tricky thing to do, because this is great, right? If you're standing in line, you can walk up to the wall and just slap down your name and phone number and email, and somebody will get back in touch with you. But it doesn't really get translated into actually having somebody in some kind of online system. So anywho, that happens, and then that one-on-one happens. So in this case, this is New Mexico. This is two First Americans, and they're having a conversation. Now, the young lady on the right is just learning about politics for the first time and figuring out how she can be activated in her community. And the lady on the left is somebody who is actually from that community and is connected with the campaign. And so again, just trying to find commonality, trying to figure out ways to get her engaged. And once she is engaged, you're going to go someplace like this. So you're going to see a field office with a bunch of phones charging somewhere and a bunch of paper on the wall again. It's a recurring theme, right? And these things are going to be basically things to tell you how to help out. And if you get good at that, well, so then we'll give you a packet like this. If you're going to walk around the neighborhood, you're going to walk and you're going to have another piece of, bunch of pieces of paper like this, a big spreadsheet that's been printed out, and you'll go and you'll select all these things and knock on these doors and talk to those people. And then somebody like this poor gentleman, who, I mean, my heart goes out to him, he will take all those clipboards that you see down there on the bottom, and he will data enter all that stuff in that computer in one night. So one of our things was to help this person out, right? To make this data collection, data entry a lot more automatic, because right now it's extremely painful, and it was done on the backs of volunteers. I mean, who, again, just to be very clear, like, volunteers made our campaign. So, and once you're involved, then you get this kind of a structure. So this is called the neighborhood team, and this is, again, sort of a Marshall Gans construct that the campaign used really effectively in '08 and refined in '12. So the notion is that here in the middle, you have a team leader named Sonia, and around her you've got 4 key roles. So it's a volunteer coordinator, just trying to keep everybody on the same page. You've got a data captain, so like that gentleman who was pounding in all that data, somebody like that. You've got a phone bank captain, somebody who's just running all the calling efforts in the community, and a canvas captain, so somebody who's making sure that people are actually getting out and knocking on doors. One thing to note, and this is true of a lot of our demographic, in this particular place, New Hampshire, all 5 of the core team members are women, roughly the ages of 55 and up, somewhere in that demographic. That was a huge chunk of our volunteer base. The other side of our volunteer base were young kids from the ages of 18 maybe to 25 who were taking time off of college. So one of the design challenges for us was, how do you bridge this community with that community using technology that works for both of them, right? So I'll give you the answer. Design everything like it's going on a tablet, and make sure it goes up and down, right? Goes up to desktop, down to mobile. So that's what we did. And then, because this is a random like volunteer organization, you can have your own roles. You can make stuff up. So this is super volunteer Mike, and that's phone banker extraordinaire somebody, Patricia. And the point of that is, again, you're recognized people, you're finding their value, and you're recognizing them within the organization. You're celebrating that they're actually adding value to what you're doing, right? It's a key component to that. So that was a neighborhood team, and then this, I believe, is Albuquerque. So here we're looking at several neighborhood teams, right? And so the person who was responsible for youth coordinating had identified every college in the area, and once they got a team, he put them up here. And while this is fantastic for people in this field office in New Mexico, it doesn't communicate to headquarters so they actually understand what's happening in New Mexico, right? So one of the things we wanted to do with our systems was also allow that kind of communication. Because again, if you're not really measuring towards a goal, you don't know if you're going to win the election or not, the things you measure are registrations, how many people you're persuading, how many people you think are going to turn out. You measure all the stuff around it. And part of that is how many teams you're building and how effective you are at building teams, right? You're measuring basically if your culture is working. And because, folks who are on these teams are anything if not crafty, they started to figure out, hey, we can use these things to organize, right? We can use Facebook, we can use Google Groups, we can use Yahoo Groups, and we can start doing this, which is great, and it was awesome, it worked really well, except again, it wasn't actually connected to the greater campaign, so they weren't really being able to communicate what they were getting done, and they weren't able to communicate or have communicated back to them, hey, here's all this stuff that's happening, here's great talking points on gay marriage, because this has become an issue. So this is what you should know, this is the official, status of the campaign or the official position of the campaign. So we knew we needed to build something that worked kind of like Facebook, but with a connection to the campaign. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff, like how we actually built this stuff. So this is, I'm kind of bastardizing Gans's formulation here, but the story of us typically is like how we find commonality, right? So if we're having that one-on-one conversation between each other and figuring out where we're connected, once we figure out we're a community, that's the story of us, right? We figured out the issues that relate to us both. So I'll take you through a little bit of the campaign. This was the day I started. So it was pretty empty. There was about 30 people on the campaign. It was pretty small. And early on, we were just trying to find any kind of commonality we could, right? So I'll let you guess which one of these is the engineer, which one of these folks. And just a note on that, because people always get upset about the sort of beards for Obama thing, like, oh, weren't there any women involved in technology on your team? And the answer is yes, there were, and they were amazing. So it's kind of it's a disservice to them that the press hasn't picked up on that as much. But one of our lead product folks, actually several of our lead product folks were all women. Kathy Bracey ran the San Francisco Tech field office for us, so she ran and coordinated a whole kind of outpost of her own. They were great, and every one of the folks who were leadership and had some form of facial hair, guess what? We all had extremely understanding wives who were feminists and also had their own careers and still put up with the fact that we joined this crazy thing and basically said, we'll see you in a year and a half. So anywho, the point here is like we're trying to find commonality, and the only commonality we had early was orange sunglasses, but you have to start somewhere. So early on, we realized that really, this is the truth, right? My job was not really delivering stuff because we had a lot of people who could deliver stuff, but actually forming this notion of diplomacy and consensus, actually figuring out how to work together, was pretty much the majority of my job. Everybody from the tech side, we came from a background in industry. Everybody from the rest of the campaign came from a background where they'd been working together for the past 5 or 6 years, right? If not more. And so the attitude was, hey, shut up, rookies. Go sit in the corner. We got this. We won in 08. I don't know what you're doing, but it looks like it's going to fuck things up. So why don't you just calm it down, right? And just go over here. And, and for good reason, because the stakes are high, and you're unknown, you're unproven, you don't really know how to communicate with each other. So the first thing that I learned was taking that Marshall Gans style format and applying it to the people that I worked with. Right? So I started taking people out for coffee a lot, no matter who they were. We started with 30 people. We ended up with 800 about a year later. So there's this massive growth. So you're walking around and you're bumping into experts and all sorts of stuff you didn't even know existed, and you don't know it because you don't have a name tag on saying, I am an expert in blah, blah, blah. You're just some person, right? And you're passing some other person, and you're both extremely busy, and you've got a 14-hour workday ahead of you. So I'm not going to take the time. I'm just going to go and tunnel in. Right? And while that makes sense in a way, in terms of overall strategy and overall cohesion, it was horrible. So I started taking people out for coffee on a regular basis and just learning their story. Right? And we tried to do a lot of things early on to create cultural bounds or, what's the word I'm looking for? Cultural ties, right? But we couldn't. We brought a lot of startup stuff in to see if that would fly, and it didn't. So Pancake Day, like building services shut us down, right? There's no real kitchen, so we thought, hey, we'll make pancakes. We'll have people. No, okay. So I tried instituting a daycare with my kids. This is like a Saturday afternoon. We worked a lot of Saturdays. I would bring them in. They'd make posters. That was okay, but nobody else had kids. This is a conference call with the president. It's kind of crazy to say, but it's true. We would get these conference calls, and because the entire office is going to be disposed of 18 months later, you don't invest a lot in facilities. right? So in this case, you've got the little phone, and then the easiest way for everybody to actually hear the conference call is the mic pointed in the speakers, right? It's like open mic night for a conference call. So we couldn't get people to do stuff like use Basecamp, right, or use product management software. They'd never heard of it. They didn't care about it. They didn't live in that world. It's like, great, that's awesome. I don't care. I'm doing this thing over here that will actually get votes. So we did stuff like putting things on the wall, right? Because everybody knows what a wall is, and everybody knows what a Post-it is, right? So you don't have to log in. You just have to walk over there. And we put it on the wall with the conference rooms in it, so that even people who didn't know what was there had to walk past it and pretend they did, right? And eventually their ignorance kind of bothered them, so then they started to say things like, what does that mean? And you had a conversation, and things started to break, right? The ice broke. Except for when press came around, which was every day, and told us to cover the wall because, I don't know, like for some reason the press would know something about it. So this was our document security system. It actually says down here, move me to see secret stuff, which the press was not a big fan of, but what can you do? So this is the office filling up. So that area, these little blue spots had originally been conference rooms, and then the interns showed up. And so this is probably like fall of 2011 or maybe early 2012. So as you can see, it's starting to get pretty packed, right? And then it just starts to get a little crazy. This was a beer pong table we bought as a joke, and it eventually became a conference room that you could book. The culture clash couldn't have been more intense. I mean, this is a buddy of mine, Chris. So here's Chris. Like he's dressed up because he's got a collared shirt on with his shorts, right? And then there's like the interns coming from Yale wearing seersucker suits in like an 80-degree office, because they're going to get that position on the Hill. And so you need to figure out again, like how do you communicate with these folks? Like how does the engineer who hasn't showered in 3 days talk to the kid who's impeccably dressed and make sure that they still understand the fact they're going for the same thing? So this is the office kind of getting towards full swing. By the end, we would actually remove every other desk unit, the filing cabinet, and we would sit 3 people. Like 3 people would sit in that little area. So to say it was tight was an overstatement or an understatement. It was insanely tight. And for most people, we struggled with it, but it's how it works, right? So this is Winnie Lamb and Lear Abraham. So Winnie's on sabbatical from Google, and Lear's on sabbatical from Facebook. So they show up with a kitchen which maybe has a broken coffee maker, and they are actually in a hallway, like they're behind my desk, right? This is where they're having a conference, right? And they have a projector, and they are sitting there thinking, what the fuck? Like, how am I supposed to get work done, right? Because this is in an 800-person room. It sounds roughly like, and the field people are walking by and going, who's coddling you? You have a projector, It's like, so working it out. So the big lesson there is just ignore what you can't control. If you can't have impact, you just have to focus in and just ignore it, right? Because it's not going to change. Bitching about it is just going to waste your energy. You just have to laser in your focus. Right? And it's really difficult. It's a learned skill. It's one that I did not have. I'm easily distracted, right? Designers are always like, oh, what's that? I can fix it. It's like, no. Just do this. Stay in your lane. It's hard to learn, right? Especially coming from startups where kind of every problem is yours to solve. That's not the case here. Many of the things that are going to happen around you are totally wrong. You just have to accept they're totally wrong and move on and remember what the goal is and look at the things you're doing and realize this set of things is actually moving it forward. This set of things isn't. Just trash that other set. As important as they sound, they won't be important a month later or a week later or a day later. So here's a few examples of things you can't control. This was Eric Schmidt came in. He was an intern of ours. This fellow here is Chris. He was the lead engineer on Dashboard. He had just stayed up until about 4 a.m. doing a product release, and we showed up the next morning, and he was told, hey, in 5 minutes, you're giving a demo to Eric Schmidt. Can't control it, just give the demo. Right? This is a marching band that happened through the office one day. This was the president stopping by to see what we were up to. Can't control it, just stay focused and present what you have to do and move on. This is Occupy Wall Street paying us a visit. They did not bring donuts, as promised. Ed Tufte stopped by one day, it's awesome, right? He's Ed Tufte. And so he comes in and he's like really excited to talk to us, and he's really genteel. This is Aaron, these are Aaron's notes. Aaron was so excited Tufte showed up. We show up and Tufte's like, do you have tea? We're like, sure. Sit in the conference room. So we run out and Aaron like washes his mug and he's like, I've got tea in my drawer. Like, I'm gonna get hot water. And he makes the thing and he's got the mug and he didn't wash it for months afterwards, right? Like Tufte drank from my mug, So he comes in, super nice, right? He had so many good lessons. And then they're like, hey, why don't you show him some of our work? So before I showed up, the campaign had bought licenses for Balsamiq. And I'm not here to rip on Balsamiq, it's a great product, whatever. But the thing uses Comic Sans, right? And we're making this up. Like one of the constraints that we had was about 80% of the work gets done in the last couple months of the campaign. So at this point, this is still like summer of 2011, we don't have users to test. We don't have anybody to work with, right? There's nobody in the field yet. They're just starting to spin it up. So we're making shit up and putting it in wireframes. We're doing that to try to at least get people used to the idea of this is a wireframe, and this is why we do this. We do this because it's easier to make a piece of paper with stuff on it than it is to actually program stuff, because that's hard and expensive, and if we do the wrong thing, we're all gonna lose. So we do these just to get people seeing things and talking to them, and then I have to present this to Ed Tufte. Well, I mean, he's like the father of graph design, and this thing is something I pulled out of a Balsamiq stencil, right? Like, I don't even know what that thing means. So he sees this, and he loses his shit. Right? He's like, why are you making this intentionally ugly? Well, sir, it's a wireframe. Are you designing for children? No, sir, we're not. We're designing for volunteers. What does that graph mean? Why wouldn't you just use a table or a spark line? Like, yes, sir, we'd consider that, thank you. So it just taught me again to kind of roll with it, and if anything, it convinced my team that I could take a beating and just keep moving, which was valuable, right? These are our lovely bathrooms. Later on, we actually went and used the bathrooms in the train station in the lobby because they were cleaner. But through all that stuff and all that crazy, all that stuff doesn't actually relate to what you're there to do, right? It's just stuff. So you have to ignore all that stuff, laugh it off, and move on. But what you have to do that's positive is celebrate little victories. So if somebody on your team does something that's good, take a few minutes to call that out in front of the rest of the team. No matter how small it is, again, you're trying to build culture and build trust and build this idea of, hey, we're all in this together. So, here's one way to do it, right? We communicated a lot with cake. So the first time we sent an app to production, we got a cake, right? It's like $20, right? But it like makes everybody go, oh, there's cake, It gets people together. Every time we raised $1 million online, we would ring a bell, right? And so a lot of times people didn't get a chance to ring the bell and they felt left out. Right, so this guy right here is a fellow named JP Schneider. He's an amazingly talented DevOps person. So he keeps all the sites running with super fast response times, the whole bit. Nobody on this entire campaign knows his name because he sat in a corner and worked insanely late hours, right? But we got JP to ring the bell and be congratulated by the rest of the campaign. Like, got him to be that person. So they could make a connection with who he was, and he could feel like his work was respected. People understood he was still there fighting for him, So again, have fun. There's a lot of ways to react to bad stuff that happens. At one point, we were working about 7 days a week. 70 is probably right, 70 to 90 hours a week. It was pretty crazy. And this fellow right here is named Abi Noda, and he fell asleep at his desk one day on a Sunday at like 2. So, as somebody who was like managing him, there's one response, which is like, you fell asleep, don't you know the president's gonna lose, Or you take a picture, Photoshop him in place of Justin Bieber, and print it out and stick it all over the office. Right? On Sundays, we had Malort o'clock. Malort is a lovely liqueur drink in Chicago. Most people hate it, actually. But we introduced the rest of the campaign to it, and so we would just do Malort o'clock every Sunday at 4. This is one of the announcements. We put this announcement together, and it would always go up to like senior campaign staff, right? And so just to see if they were paying attention, we would do stuff like this. Again, just showing them, hey, like this is a good thing, like response time's going down, and this is a cat. Yeah. And so yeah, we cake. So all that said, let's get into a little bit about what it was actually like doing design work. So we've talked a lot about other stuff. So I threw the word chicanery in there. I'm actually doing that whole dictionary thing. Man, like it's a kind of a cliched thing, but it's true. We used, this word is right, like it's absolutely right. We used trickery because we didn't have all the other ways that you could actually do design work, right? Typically doing design work, you put the user in the center of the process. Hey, guess what? In the public side, the user is everybody in America, and on the volunteer side, the users are people who are going to show up in about a year and use your stuff. So start building stuff now and hope it works, right? So you have to figure out all these little ways around the traditional way in which you work, right? You don't have users, and if you do, you have a massively huge set of people to work against. So what can you do? So the first things that we did was we tried all the traditional methods, right? Which would be like big designery things, you know, like this. So here's a big printout. Here's more printouts. Again, press loved this so much. This is in the back of a storage closet. But we're looking at trying to find patterns, you know, and it's not working, right? We're banging our head against the wall. We're not getting through to the rest of the campaign. So we had to step back and we had to take that moment. And this is where, again, we really started connecting these one-on-ones and connecting with individuals across the campaign, taking a little bit of time and figuring out who knew what. So this is Anthea Watson. She worked in product, but she had worked in the campaign in '08, and she could lay out the entire flow from soup to nuts for how things could work. So I started to understand field by talking to her, right, and engaging. This is us taking people from technology, field, design, comms, everywhere across the campaign. We're asking them to impersonate people. We had set up some personas. We're saying, pretend you're this, pretend you're a neighborhood team leader, pretend you're a field organizer, pretend you're a volunteer. Draw how the system works. You give them beer so that they stay. This is our first usability test. I'm not going to say things went well. Gabe is a Linux developer. He never really developed things with the UI outside of Linux. You can understand, you know, it might be a challenge. This guy's feeling the same thing. He's sitting on the other side of the screen like, I can't believe I'm using screens. And this was hard for us, right? We're trying to figure out, like, these people hate our stuff, right? We made a person cry in Iowa, right? When they rolled out some of the stuff we were building, they're like, this is the only way to communicate with the campaign. And this volunteer cried. She's like, I want to help, but I hate computers. Like, okay, let's be clear. Like, that's not the only way for you to help. Like, whoever told you that, we need to work on that. But it was really difficult at first to get people to buy in. So what we ended up doing was, as we built far enough along, that then we started to go out, and where there were these communities of interest forming, these neighborhood teams, we would just go, and I'm extremely lazy, so we would just have them do co-design. We would have them design stuff. We would take their designs, we would just draw it, like we got rid of balsamic and stuff, and then we would comp it, and we'd take it back out to them. And so eventually, we started smiling a little bit more. That's the team that did all the UI work on this thing called Dashboard, which is a platform to connect with the campaign for volunteers. And we started to see signs like this pop up across the country, not everywhere. We didn't have uniform adoption, but we had good adoption. And we saw that if you actually used our stuff, you were a lot more productive. So we knew that we were getting some wins. This is our support team. This is one of these amazing ladies in tech. This is Brady Chris. She organized all these folks. Some of these kids are high school kids. Some of them are just people who are volunteers who wanted to really hang out. Nobody in the campaign had ever budgeted for a support team, so they never thought we'd have to actually have support people to support all the software we were building. So we did it all with volunteers, and Brady coordinated all of them and got them in and helped us out. And eventually we got to a point where we had the president actually come on and give a video address on Dashboard. So at that point we knew, you know, we had the campaign was on our side as well. So one of the things I learned about that was just being selfless in pursuit of team goals. So this is Mark Trammell, who'll be speaking later today. He's amazing. He's a great design researcher. I'd met him at another event, and I figured out, like, hey, you know, Trammell can come in, do some of the things that we can't because he's got this expertise, he's got this outside perspective he can come in with. We had a bunch of synthesis stuff for him to carry forward. He did it in a really selfless fashion. I'm running out of time, so I'll just go quickly. Find the patterns. Dave was one of our interns. He just got spreadsheets from every state. We found all the same stuff and put it all together. Little things have big impact. This is Scout Addis. He comes with whiskey and a Nerf gun. He would just go through and do conversion things. We raised conversion almost 70% on like the donation form alone over the course of the campaign just by A/B testing and adjusting his little stuff. All these folks came in and did amazing volunteer work. Let's go quickly because again I'm running out of time. Make everything participatory. So here, this is a flow. We would sit there and do flows and then present them. And we realized we're not getting buy-in, so we did this. We're going to tape all the stuff we're doing to a whiteboard, and we're going to invite people to come over. Right? We're just going to work on it on the fly with them right there. So you're a business owner or a stakeholder of some kind. We're not going to have you like wait and here's the thing like Don Draper. We're going to just sit here and go, let's work this out together. This isn't about us selling you work. This is about us agreeing this is the right work to do. And we established one-day deadlines. So I would sketch crappy things on my iPad, and then the next day we would code them up in Bootstrap, and then we'd take them out and test. And that got us to this, right? Which is that if we slowed down what we were trying to do, took it in bite-sized pieces, we could do smooth, nice iterations on stuff, and those iterations then allowed us to get really quick. And it paid off for us. This is the whole Orca narwhal thing. I won't go into a lot of detail, but Romney didn't do this. We did it. We took all those volunteers. We had them do national usability tests across the country. We knew our stuff for Get Out the Vote for the actual election worked. They didn't do that stuff. Their stuff all failed. It had an impact on the election. We know that we were able to make sure resources were getting assigned effectively, and they weren't. Bottom line thing, value of community, building culture, that's immeasurable. Like we measured everything we could in the campaign because you're trying to measure everything you can, because again, you can't measure the main thing to know how you're doing, so you do everything else. But all these little community things, like happening to meet Scout somewhere and convincing him to come with us, convincing Trammell to come volunteer and give 5 months of his life for free to help us do stuff. Like all those things ended up leading to us winning. None of them were predictable, none of them are really measurable, but having those connections is what counted. And for me, like the outcome, I got my daughter to meet the president, which was pretty cool. It was all right by me. So just a quick pitch, stop complaining and do something, right? Like the one thing I'd take away from my experience is that nonprofits are horrendously understaffed in terms of design, technology, the skills of people in this room. So if you're interested in making a difference in this country in any way, they can use skills of people like you greatly. That's it. Thank you. Thanks. I don't know if we have time for questions. I think I might have blown that. Oh, do we? We have time? Is that cool? A few minutes? Okay, cool. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Yes. Sure. So yeah, the question is sort of how we design for both sets of users. We knew that for the most part, older users didn't always, but mostly correlated with desktop, or a lot of desktop usage, younger users, a lot of mobile usage. And so before Twitter Bootstrap came out, we built sort of our own system, and then eventually for all the later stuff we built, we just used Bootstrap. And when we designed stuff, like even in the sketch phase, you sketched everything for tablet, so everything for fingers, not for mice. Right? Because it's really hard to go the other way. You can always res up on a desktop and say, oh, we're going to add in all these extra little things you can do with a full keyboard and a mouse, but you can't really bring that experience back down. And then if you have it for tablet, you pretty much have it for mobile. It's just a little bit more of a layout and content priority issue. So, I mean, it's the same kind of mobile first thing you hear elsewhere, but it's just really true. We had to do it that way, because we knew if we didn't, for the most part, a lot of our stuff wouldn't be that well used. And we saw this across every single thing. I think 1/3 or more of the money that the store brought in was brought in by mobile devices. We really saw a giant shift from the beginning of the campaign till the end of the campaign in the amount of mobile usage, and it just kept going up and up. So it was a place we had to be. Yes? Definitely. Yes, so 2 quick questions. I'm afraid those are the last questions. So the first one is, like, did the president being a celebrity status or special candidate help? Totally, right? We were able to engage with people. How do you convince Mark Trammell, who, I just left my job at Twitter, it was high stress, oh, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you move across the country for 5 months for free and just work your butt off? It had to be that candidate to get that to happen. The second one being about like mobile usage. Did actually getting people to text in initially kind of increase mobile usage? Yeah, I think so. I mean, we had a quick donate thing that we made up that was basically the ability to text money in as well. And the scenarios we were going for is like you're angry, you're watching a debate at a bar, and you're like, oh, I'm so mad, right? Give money. So hitting people where they live, and where they live is more and more not in front of a big screen. So I'm sorry. Okay, last question.
What would you do differently this time? What did you learn? Like if you were doing this all over again, either technologically or things you learned about how people behave.
Okay, so what would I change if we had to do it all over again? I think the biggest thing would be that we started out with a notion in headquarters that we were all going to like really be able to do this really fast and get people to adopt into new technologies quickly. That wasn't true. Some of the stuff I tried advocating for was just really simple hacks, and I think the simple hacks were the ones that would actually provide more value. A lot of it's around those dudes with clipboards or those ladies with clipboards having to enter that data. I think making that go faster probably would have been as impactful as a lot of other stuff we did. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Sorry to run over.